What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Imagine walking into a Russian grocery store next winter. The air smells faintly of stale bread, the lighting is dim because the store is saving electricity, and you notice something strange. Every single price tag in the store is exactly the same as it was the year before. At first glance you think, wow, finally some kind of stability. But then reality hits. The apples look like they have been through a war zone. The potatoes are green and sprouting. The meat counter is empty, except for a few suspicious slabs wrapped in plastic. And the sale signs? Well, they are not there, not because prices dropped, no. They are there because the store has, well, simply nothing left to sell at all. This is not a scene from 1980s Soviet drama. This is the not-so-distant potential future that the Kremlin is engineering right now. According to Kommersant, the Ministries of Agriculture and Industry have cooked up a plan to lock in grocery purchase prices for essential products through rigid one-year contracts between producers and retailers. The goal, they claim, is to avoid market fluctuations. In reality, between 80 and 90% of groceries will be tied up in these frozen price deals. That means, whether your harvest is wiped out by frost, fuel prices triple, or the ruble falls off a cliff, your contract price still stays the same. And if you ever paid attention to history, you know exactly how this ends. Empty shelves, bankrupt farmers, skyrocketing black market prices, and the government pretending it is all going according to the plan. This is not about inflation. This is not about helping the people. This is about choking the last free mechanisms left in Russia's economy, the price tag itself, and then replacing it with yet another lever for state control. And the last thing that stands between this nonsense being actually implemented is the decision by the Central Bank of Russia, or better say, forced approval. Because if Putin forces them to green-light this economic monstrosity, there will be absolutely no way back. So, is the Central Bank of Russia under huge pressure to make this critical mistake? Absolutely. Will they do it? Let's try to answer this question in today's video. The Kremlin's sales speech is simple. The evil free market causes prices to fluctuate, hurting ordinary citizens, not the special military operation or oligarchs stealing billions, no way. So the government will swoop in to keep prices fair for the whole year. Sounds nice in propaganda brochure, and people would finally get some sort of stability. But agriculture is not factory assembly line. You cannot predict the cost of producing food the way you can predict the cost of making, light bulbs. Nature is the ultimate wild card. One year, you might have a perfect growing season, mild spring, just enough rain, no pests, and your potatoes are so plentiful you cannot give them away fast enough. But the next year, a late frost in May wipes out half of your crops before they even broke in the soil. Then add the man-made chaos, diesel prices jumping because an oil tycoon needs a new yacht, fertilizer imports drying up thanks to sanctions, parts for tractors and combines costing triple because the ruble is tanking. You get the idea, right? If you're a small farm, that kind of unpredictability is already a nightmare. But now imagine you're locked into a contract that forces you to sell your potatoes for the same price no matter what happens. If your costs skyrocket, you eat the loss. And if you can afford to, well, you just go bankrupt. No other choice. Big agro corporations with billion ruble reserves can survive a bad year by leaning on other profitable products in their portfolio. Sell eggs at a loss, for example, but make it back on butter. But what about small producers? One bad harvest under these fixed price contracts and that's it, you're gone. Because the next paycheck is 1 year from now. And here's the thing, the Kremlin knows it. This is not some oversight. Wiping out small competition is a feature, not a bug. The fewer players in the market, the easier it is for the government to pull the strings. Once the independents are gone, you are left with a handful of mega corporations who will happily obey whatever guidance they are given in exchange for monopoly power. And if you think this is nonsense, the invincible hand of the market will always find a way to balance things. Well guys, we are talking about Putin's Russia. Just take a look at oil companies, for example. Even Russians themselves cannot name more than, 3. Gazprom, Rosneft and Lukoil, probably even you heard about them. All the smaller competition, destroyed and acquired by Putin's inner circle within the first years of his presidency. Can the same thing happen in a completely different sector or industry? What do you think? Of course, absolutely. But let's imagine for a second, fixed prices shenanigans will actually be implemented. Do you think the sellers will just eat the cost and do nothing? Let's try to figure this out in our next chapter. Here is the part that would make any real economist choke on Russian tea in laughter. This stability scheme does not lower prices, it raises them. In a free market, prices go up or down based on actual conditions. Extra crops means prices drop. A shortage means prices rise. Well, simple as that. Supply and demand, economics 101. But in the Kremlin's model, producers have to guess what their costs will be for the entire next year when they sign the contract. And, well, they are not going to be optimistic. Let's now consider two possible scenarios. If the actual costs are lower than the estimated, versus actual costs being higher than the estimated. Scenario number 1. Let's say it costs you 50 rubles today to produce a carton of eggs. And let's say you are asked to set a price for all of next year. Not the government sets the price, but you. Are you going to gamble that nothing will go wrong? Of course not. You'll plan for the worst. Diesel prices go up 30%, feed prices doubled, a disease outbreak killing half your hens. So you set the price at 100 rubles, just to be safe. Then the retailer marks it up to 120. And now the consumer pays the disaster price all year, even if nothing actually goes wrong. This is a dream for big corporations. They lock in huge margins and have guaranteed buyers for the entire year. For smaller producers, it is self-destruction. They cannot build in massive buffers without pricing themselves out of the deal. Once again, competition dies, monopolies thrive, and the state gets exactly what it wants. A market run by a handful of obedient giants. And here's where it gets even more twisted. Because prices are fixed high just in case, the government can brag about stability while consumers quietly bleed more money than they would in a normal market. Inflation does not disappear, it is just baked into the system upfront. And now scenario number 2. You set the prices, or most likely the state does it for you because it wants to satisfy people. And these prices promise you razor-thin margins, or in case any small thing goes wrong, you are bound to lose money. Some farmers will go out of business, 100%. Some will barely survive. Some will suffer huge revenue losses, but well, they do have some sort of reserves to recover. And guess what happens once these fixed prices contracts expire? Every single surviving farmer raises prices immediately to recover the losses. Everyone starts thinking about building financial safety cushion in case the government comes up with something genius like this in the future. So the prices go even higher, way higher than before. The ones paying for it all, once again, the regular people. It's just simple math, plain middle school level economics. No matter what you do, if you decide to freeze the prices, everyone suffers. The producers, the consumers, everyone. But then, there are also complementary businesses, which are tied to the whole supply chain. Fertilizers, transportation, animal feed, heavy machinery and equipment. You cannot just influence one gargantuan sector of the economy without rattling everyone else. But I guess not everyone in the Kremlin understands this simple truth. Let's talk about this domino effect in our next chapter. You cannot freeze one link in the supply chain without eventually freezing them all. Say you fix the price of a beef for a year. Sounds good until the cost of animal feed doubles, because feed producers are not under the same rules. Now beef farmers are losing money and threatening to shut down. The government has two options. Pump in subsidies, meaning printing even more rubles and raising inflation even further, or drag feed producers into the very same fixed price trap. And that's exactly how you slide into full-blown Soviet-style planning without ever admitting it. Animal feed producers then demand the same for fertilizer suppliers. Fertilizer producers demand it from oil companies supplying diesel. And before long, every critical input is under government-mandated contract, and the entire system is rigid, brittle, and completely dependent on political decisions. Political decisions coming from the Kremlin, mind you. Not exactly the best think tank of the world, right? Now imagine what happens when one link breaks. A frost kills 40% of potato crops. Well, for example, under a normal market, prices go up, more producers shift to potatoes next season and the shortage eases. Under this system, the producer cannot raise prices to cover losses. The retailer cannot buy from somebody else because they locked all the same contracts. You don't get expensive potatoes, you just simply get no potatoes at all. That's exactly how you go from price stability to Soviet-style empty shells. And once shortages hit, the black market steps in. Those very same potatoes will magically appear at triple the official price, sold out of car trunks and street corners. The poor cannot afford them, the rich hoard them, and the government blames saboteurs and speculators instead of its own idiotic policies. Thank God at least you will not go to jail for discrediting the Russian army, just because you bought some contraband cheese. Or actually, who knows? If the regime wants to put you in jail, they will find a way to do it no matter what. Okay, let's not kid ourselves. Russia does not have many personal or economic freedoms left. You cannot speak freely without risking jail. You cannot run for office unless the Kremlin says so. Your property rights exist only until someone with a government title decides they don't. The oligarchs are not true businessmen. They are caretakers of state assets, holding them only as long as it suits the regime, and then sharing them when the Tsar asks them to do it. But here is one thing even the smallest entrepreneur could still do. Set the price of what they sell. That's it. You grow tomatoes, you decide how much to charge. You bake bread, you set the loaf price. It's not much, but it is something. That's how at least free economic market works. And now there is a very last shred of autonomy is in the government's crosshairs. Why? Because free prices make the regime look weak. If food prices jump uncontrollably, quote-unquote, after a bad harvest or currency crash, everyone notices. People start asking questions. They get angry. In the Kremlin's mind, that's not an economic issue. It's a national security threat. The regime cannot afford people going to the streets protesting food prices because, before you know it, one protest can quickly evolve into another. And that is what Putin fears the most. So, instead of fixing the root causes, war spending draining the budget first of all, sanctions wrecking imports, a currency in free fall, oligarchs stealing, they just focus on weak and unprotected. Small farmers, local producers, moms and pops. By taking control of prices, they are not fixing the economy, they are blinding the public to its ongoing collapse. It's like smashing the thermometer to cure a fever. If you cannot see high temperature, you are not sick, right? Makes sense. At least in the minds of Kremlin people. And when the shortages do hit, they'll spin it as a noble sacrifice for stability and victory. Because that's what their grandparents did in order to win in the Second World War. Because that's what they have to do now. This is their generation's sacrifice. The last question that needs to be answered is whether the Central Bank of Russia allows this nonsense. It does not take an economic genius to see that fixing prices is a bad idea. So as long as the central bank has the freedom to make its own decisions, it is highly unlikely price freezes to happen. But, well, that's where the biggest problem lies. Has the freedom to make its own decisions. Do you think Putin allows anyone to have this much of power? Well, unfortunately, there is your answer then. Well, there you have it, guys. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you wish to support our work and keep the Russian dude independent, there are links down below. For example, PayPal donations. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow. We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.